The more I make these store jars, the more I'm asked whether they can be used as urns or not, for pets and people, and truthfully, at the beginning, it was a bit of a surprise to receive these requests, as I never set out with the intention of making pots with this purpose. Yet at the same time, what an honour it is to make pots that serve this function. I think it's the tapering bottom that many of my pieces have that sets them into this world of pottery. Some of the shapes of these pots have always reminded me of canopic jars, the sorts used in Egyptian burial, with their narrow feet and strong lids. They've been an influence to some degree, as has a request by my father, who ultimately wants to be cremated. I'm sorry, this is a slightly morbid subject, but he's a craftsperson and he wants to see the object he's going to be placed in before he passes, which to some degree has put some pressure on me to really push this side of my work. I suppose it's also a good thing that I love making store jars. And here are the components from some that I threw yesterday. To make sure the bodies and lids match, I score a number onto the bottom of each so that I don't mix them up as they're drying. Normally what happens as the lid is so much thicker than the body is that it dries out much more slowly, which means in this case I had to wrap the body portions up so they didn't dry out any further, and I left the lids upright like this, exposed to the air, so they could keep drying as I trimmed through them. Ideally, I want both parts to be as close to the same consistency as possible when trimming them. I also want to make sure they are perfectly leather hard. The stoneware no longer feels cold to the touch, and I can press it and pick the objects up and squeeze it without it deforming easily. The problem is, if one part is much softer than the other and you trim them to fit, they'll then dry out at different rates thereafter and can end up not fitting each other, so it's crucial to get them dried out to the right point when refining both parts to match. This is what clay looks like if it's too soft. These are some mugs that I threw yesterday too, but you can see if I rub the bottoms, the wiring off marks are easily smudged as my finger glides over them, and the pots themselves also feel cold and sticky, which means they would be practically impossible to trim without completely destroying them. And it's for this reason that learning how to identify when something is properly leather hard is so important, as you never want to trim when pots are too hard or too soft. In a way, it's a sort of similar skill to learning what sort of consistency is best to throw pots with, but it's also one that often in beginner settings, the technicians take over, which can be frustrating as you don't really have control over it, and therefore you don't learn it and you can't identify when pots are best to turn. The first thing I do when trimming lidded wares is start with the lid. This way, as I trim the locating flange, which is the vertical portion you can see here sloping upwards, I can simply lower the jar over this periodically as I turn, instead of constantly having to take the lid off and place it on top of the jar, which is a really inefficient way of making. As for the lids, at the thrown stage, I'm really just making a very rudimentary shape. What's important is where that locating flange is, as it has to slot inside the pot. But other than that, they're made really sloppily, as every single surface of them is trimmed at the leather hard stage. So there's simply no point fussing over them and making them pristine and perfect at that initial thrown stage, as I'll do all of that tidying up now, once the part is turned leather hard. I trim away quite a lot from the inside just to make the component lighter, and then I quickly just sponge over the surface, using one of these very dense mud tools sponges, as these can be wiped over the surface of the clay without leaving obvious sponge marks, and they can also be held in rather interesting shapes, which makes them wonderfully versatile. The thing is, and what I've come to realise, is that the smoother the surface of clay at this stage, and the less pock marks there are, the more evenly the glaze will settle onto the surface when it's dipped into it, as the glaze can't settle into these tiny holes, pushing air out and creating small craters on the surface, which I'd then have to wipe over and tidy up. With the underside of the lid trimmed, I can attach the body onto the wheel. I do this by placing it onto a skim of slip, which holds the pot in place like glue, especially after it dries. And I'm focusing on the inside of the rim being the most centered portion of the pot, not necessarily these lines on the outside, as I can always trim them back to being perfect if they are undulating a touch. And the last thing I do to keep it securely held against the wheel head is just press in the corner of this plastic kidney at the very bottom, sealing the clay against the metal. As for trimming, I normally start from top to bottom, and one of the tools I use most is this tungsten carbide blade made by Phil Poberka of Bison Tools, who's no longer with us, unfortunately. When making these, he would ask for your palm's measurement, and he would make the handle so it fit your hand perfectly. And I've used this one so much that I think the bottom portion of the blade is just beginning to wear away, which you can see here as it pinches in just a touch, which is a shame as it means it's no longer perfectly straight. So I may need to use a diamond file to straighten it again, but otherwise it still works perfectly. I just can't rely on the tool itself to give me that perfect straight edge. The walls of this pot aren't that thick, yet at the same time I need to trim them back thin enough to account for the thick layer of glaze that will coat the pot once fired, otherwise it could end up being very heavy. I've just run a damp sponge over the rim to keep the clay moist, as parts of it were just beginning to turn white, which means it's turning bone dry and would therefore be a touch more susceptible to splitting or cracking as the clay becomes brittle. The softer it is, the more malleable it is, and there's a sweet spot at the leather hard stage where there is still some flex in the clay, yet not enough for the pressure of the tool pressing in to simply bow and distort it. Generally, as I trim, my left hand is doing a few things. First off, if possible, I can reach it inside to feel the cross-section of the pot I'm trimming. This way I know precisely how thin the walls are, and it means I can be a lot more accurate when trimming the walls of my pot, which is one of the reasons I trim them the right way up to begin with. I can then move on to the lower tapering half, which in terms of proportionality when making my work should roughly account for half the height of the pot. Otherwise, if this tapering section is too short, the pots can appear quite stout and they lose any elegance they had. And as I trim this part, I pay very close attention to the shape inside too, as the last thing I want to do here is to create a thin patch, as with all the weight above it and the lid, as the pot reduction fires it can crumple and the entire pot can simply slump downward. That's of course if it's trimmed really thin, but even if it only slumps slightly, it can still create a subtle undulation in the shape that completely ruins the sharp angularity of the rest of the pot. Now, the opening on this piece was actually a touch too wide for the lid, so in order to try and rectify this, I ran a very wet sponge over the lip just to soften the clay, and then I'll very carefully press it inward both with a wooden tool and my fingertips. I really don't need the rim to move very much, I just need it to slope inward by about 1 millimeter or so. This way the lid will no longer rattle slightly when slotted in place. Much better. The next step is trimming the lid itself, and as these pots will be intended as urns, I do two things. The first is I leave the lid to be quite heavy, this way it's held quite firmly in place. I also make sure it's practically airtight, which is why I bowed the lip inward slightly before, as if somebody's ashes are going to be placed into these, I'd prefer that it's an airtight environment. And for that reason, recently when making these, I actually end up leaving the lid to be purposefully tight at this stage. This way, once the pot has actually been fired, I can grind it back using chemical valve lapping paste to create a really silky, perfect seal. To carve away the concave surface these lids have, I've been using this Tortuga Tools trimmer which Kevin Scott gave me. I'll leave links by the way to as many of the tools I'm using in the description. I quite like the tight curve this blade has. It makes trimming these concave shapes rather easy, which is something I do by the way, as it makes flooding it thickly with glaze easier, as there's essentially a pool that can all gather into. It also means that despite being glazed very thickly, the glass still melts into a perfectly flat layer, which means the pot keeps its sharp, pristine appearance, as if on the other hand I left it perfectly flat when coated thickly in glaze. As it melts, it would sort of create a dome, like when you fill a glass of water up too much, and just for a moment, due to the surface tension, it raises above the lip of the glass. That's sort of what would happen here if I didn't create this concave surface. I try to keep all the sharp edges really crisp, but I don't want them to come to razor sharp points, as otherwise they'll be so susceptible to chipping if something is knocked against them, and it's for this reason that I just soften them with my fingertips, just to take the edge off, in a similar way to how woodworkers just chamfer the edges of furniture they're making. The last part to trim with the pot this way up is the lip itself. I leave it sturdy initially, just to add strength to the pot as I turn it, but in its previous form it was a touch too bulky for my liking. I keep this edge rounded too, for the reasons I just mentioned about chipping and so on. Despite it being trimmed to a very fine edge that can be prone to warping, as I'll be firing the lid in situ both for the bisque and glaze firing, it'll hold the opening in place, keeping it nice and round and preventing it from distorting. To separate the pot from the wheel, I slide a sharp metal knife underneath it and catch it with my left hand. Next, as I'm going to be trimming this vessel on the wheel head, I scrape away any excess left on the metal, delicately place the lid down and center it, and then I can slot the jar over the lid. And as it fits so tightly, it sort of holds the body of the jar in place like a chuck. In fact, both parts sort of do this for each other, which makes the trimming process itself rather seamless. I also place a spinner on top. This is a tool where the black and white parts spin separately, which means I can hold on to the black part whilst the white part spins with the pot, and it makes applying downward pressure consistently a bit easier, as the rotating pot itself has no influence over my fingers, and essentially I'm just having to think about one less thing. And once again, to create a neater surface, I begin by softening it with a sponge, and then I run over this with a kidney. This works rather well if you do feel like the surface of clay is becoming too dry. Just be careful soaking the walls if they are really thin, as you don't want to overdo it and weaken them, and then apply more pressure from the outside, as that would simply bow the walls inward. And then to really knit the surface of clay together, I wet it again, and then I compress it with the plastic kidney. And with that, all that's left to trim is the base of the pot. And despite the spinner being taken off, I'm still having to apply downward pressure as I trim. You can see how my left hand's fingers are pressing down firmly against the bottom. And then, as I start trimming from the centre, it's the tool itself that's pressing down, but I transfer that pressure to my fingertips as they take the central position. I've been thinking about the bases of my pots a lot lately, and one element I want to improve is the finesse of them. I want them to feel lighter and more delicate, and thus I've been trimming the foot itself to be much smaller. I'm speaking about the portion that will actually come into contact with whatever surface it's placed on. It's about 2 or 3 millimeters across here, and I think it conveys a better sense of delicacy, whilst being balanced and strong enough to take its weight. As the clay of the bodies of these jars is a touch on the hard side, to burnish the foot properly it has to be dampened, before I can use the smooth side of a plastic kidney to compress the clay and to create a neater finish. And lastly, the foot itself is stamped. This does of course to some degree distort the foot, so after being pressed in, I run over it carefully with a plastic kidney to return the foot to its pristine form. Then, importantly, it's placed onto a very smooth surface, a bat, in this instance made from high pressure laminate. This way nothing can imprint itself into the still relatively soft clay. There's always some tidying up that has to be done on the underside of the lid, especially on the outmost edge where a burr of clay typically appears. But also, as the body was trimmed atop this, its rim can spin in place here, scuffing up the clay I previously finished so neatly. Which means this is just the last touch of quality control that has to be done. Otherwise, any marks left on the lid at this stage will be locked into the fired clay forever. And the very last thing I double check, especially as I drop this lid, is its top, and its crisp, fine edge that will end up being the most prominent feature of this jar. Visually, it's immensely simple, but I'm sure after just watching that, you'll realise just how much care and attention goes into each piece. The next piece I'll turn has a slightly more complex shape, and a lid that was still a touch on the soft side. It's incredible how quickly this 600°C heat gun dries out and hardens the clay. Just don't hold it in one spot for too long, otherwise it will cause the clay to crack. As you can see, this lid is a touch too large for the body, so I thin out this vertical locating flange until the body slots over it tightly. I think this is a really good thing to test yourself on if you are new to making ceramics, as it's one thing making a bowl or a cup, something that's essentially just one ceramic component. But creating two things that have to fit each other is a good test of your ability, and it can be immensely tricky at the start. And you'll find the most typical mistake beginners make is that the lids end up being too small for the jars themselves, and therefore end up rattling around in place, which is why I think I focus so much nowadays on getting them to fit perfectly. Now, with this jar, I noticed that there was some movement in certain parts of it. The vessel undulated as it span, and so in order to fix this, I simply flip the pot upside down, and as the undulation in the rim essentially transfers into the base, if I trim the base flat, then this means that when I place it back the right way up, the subtle undulation in the lip and in the angular shape beneath it should mostly be corrected. It doesn't always completely solve it, and it does of course depend on how severe the undulations are, but in this instance the difference is huge, and the pot now spins in place a lot better. So, once again, I can attach it to the wheel with some slip, and I make sure when I do this to not brush slip across the entirety of the base, as by doing so, it can make the pot very difficult to remove by sliding a knife beneath it, as the tip of the blade has to reach the centre of the vessel, whereas if you only brush slip around the outside, then you just have to slide it underneath a small amount. This urn has a slightly more complex shape, but I want to trim the wide lid it's going to have so that it's in line with the portion of the wall on the jar that's flaring out at the top. I think this will make it stand out a touch more, and it's a shape I haven't really made before. In terms of volume, I'm still trying to figure out what works best, as the ashes produced by people and pets obviously vary a lot. There are lots of calculators online, but I think for my online shop restocks, I'm going to have a few in numerous sizes for people to purchase when those drops go live. There are also pots, considering their function, that I will make as commissions for people if they get in touch. And this feels terrible to say, but obviously I have to pick and choose, as nowadays, with the demand for my pottery, there's simply no way I can produce enough work for everybody. But there's no harm getting in touch. So, for the lid of this piece, I threw it with much more clay than was necessary, as I didn't know precisely the final shape I wanted. I do this rather a lot actually, when making lidded wares. I throw them so they're thicker and wider, this way there's always ample material to work with, rather than simply trying to work with too little, and not quite being able to reach your goals. From this point, the outside of the lid can be trimmed back to be in line with the portion of the wall underneath it. This is one of those shapes that's much easier to trim with a mirror in front of me, as with all these angles and straight lines, its profile is everything. So despite not being in shot, obviously, opposite me on the workbench there's a mirror, through which I can see a perfect side view of the pot. This makes perfecting the profile much easier. Otherwise, in order to properly see the shape, you have to lean back awkwardly, or you have to get off the wheel and crouch down beside the vessel to get a good look, as ultimately, when viewed from above, everything is slightly distorted. This next sequence shows the difference in surface texture quite well. You can see how rough it is here, but after being dampened with a sponge and then burnished over with a plastic kidney, I'm left with a much smoother, knitted together layer of clay. With the lid trimmed, next in the step in the routine that I always follow is the lip. The only thing I'm very careful about when doing this is not making the wall here too thin, as ultimately the lip still has to support the weight of everything when the pot is flipped upside down when I trim the base. And there's been a few cases where I have trimmed it too thin. Then, when I flip it over, suddenly the entire pot drops by about a centimetre or so as the raised lip section literally cracks off. Now, I'm comfortable enough doing this that I don't place any clay supports around the lid when I'm trimming the base of the pot. But if you are just trying this, please do, as if you don't press down hard enough or the lid itself isn't heavy enough, you'll find that the entire assemblage just skids across the wheel head. You can see the colour of the clay change as it's burnished, and this is something that I don't do excessively. It really is just one pass or two, as the difference it makes for the glazing really is quite staggering. I find when trimming thinner bases that tungsten carbide blades work wonderfully, because as they're so sharp, you don't actually have to apply much downward pressure with them. Whereas with duller trimmers and conventional steel looped turning tools, you actually end up having to apply so much more downward force simply to get the tool to bite. And in doing so, this can distort the shape of the pot. And for instance, the thin floor of the pot can bow inward, which is never a good look, as it signifies some loss of control and clearly shows that it was turned too thin, or when it was too wet. Often when I'm burnishing edges, I just lick my finger and press this against the clay. It's a bit strange, I know, but it provides the lubrication needed to slightly dampen the clay, which helps to create a softer edge. I really like this shape. It's slightly more complex in nature, and there's a simple minimalism to it, so I'll definitely recreate it scaled up and shrunk down too, some miniatures. Anyway, I also made a variety of other shapes, such as this simple cylindrical jar with a step in the waist. I also made an even more stripped back version, a piece where the lid is really the part that shines. Ultimately, I've been making jars for a long time, but it's sort of rare that I actively call them urns, and I suppose this decision to make them more purposefully has sort of changed the way I view making these pots, as to some degree an urn is ultimately a purely decorative object, but its simple function of course has to work. It has to be able to contain something, and enough of something, so I guess this will ultimately be a bit of a learning curve. Already, I think the shapes with the tapering bottom feel more appropriate. There's something almost figurative about them. With the tapering section, the legs, then there's the torso and the lid, which almost feels like a hat or a head or something. The others don't feel quite as practical or elegant, and I'm finding myself leaning towards the two on the right, as I like the slightly more complex shapes. Now, with lidded forms, I tend to dry them quite slowly, so I'll sling some plastic over them, and then as they dry out very slowly, under wraps, every day I simply just spin the lids a touch. This way I hope they dry out more evenly, and they tend not to dry and lock in place, which can happen from time to time. If you've made it this far, you'll have to let me know which shape you like best. I love some of them as store jars, but I don't like all of them as urns, and the more I look at these, the more I'm sold on the narrow foot with the elongated, taller bodies. Anyhow, that's all for this week. A simple look at the trimming process for urns I've been creating. By the way, if there are any shapes you'd ever like to see me tackle, or if there are certain techniques you'd like to see me expand upon, do let me know, as it's always quite fun and engaging to create the content that you folks might find interesting or helpful. Thank you so much for taking your precious time to watch, and I'll see you next week.